Queen Lucia by E.F. Benson. Read for LibriVox.org by Martin Clifton. Chapter 11. The manoeuvres of the next week became so bewilderingly complicated that by Wednesday Georgie was almost thinking of going away to the seaside with Foljambe and Dicky in sheer despair, and in after years he could not without great mental effort succeed in straightening it all out, and the effort caused quite a buzzing in his head. That Sunday evening Lucia sent an invitation to Lady Ambermere for dinner and tableaux, to which Lady Ambermere's people replied by telephone on Monday afternoon that her ladyship was sorry to be unable. Lucia therefore gave up the idea of a dinner party and reverted to her original scheme of an evening party like Olga's, got up on the spur of the moment, with great care and most anxious preparation. The rehearsals for the impromptu tableau meantime went steadily forward behind closed doors, and Georgie wrestled with 20 bars of the music of the Awakening of Brunhilde. Lucia intended to ask nobody until Friday evening, and Olga should see what sort of party Riseholme could raise at a moment's notice. Early on Tuesday morning the devil entered into Daisy Quantock, probably by means of subconscious telepathy, and she proceeded to go round the green at the morning Parliament and ask everybody to come in for a good romp on Saturday evening, and they all accepted. Georgie, Lucia and Olga were absentees, and so, making a house-to-house visitation, she went first to Georgie. He, with his secret knowledge of the tableau, indeed he was stitching himself a robe to be worn by King Cophetua at the time, and hastily bundling it under the table, regretted that he was already engaged. This was rather mysterious, but he might have planned, for all Mrs. Quantock knew, an evening when he would be busy indoors, and since those evenings were never to be pried upon, she asked no questions, but went off to Lucia's to give her invitation there. There again she was met with a similarly mysterious refusal. Lucia much regretted that she and Peppino were unable to come, and she hoped Daisy would have a lovely party. Even as she spoke she heard her telephone bell ringing, and hurried off to find that Georgie, faithful lieutenant, was acquainting her with the fact that Mrs. Quantock was planning a party for Saturday. He did not know how far she had got. At that moment she had got just half-way to Old Place, walking at unusual speed. Lucia grasped the situation with amazing quickness, and cutting off Georgie with a snap, she abandoned all idea of her party being impromptu and rang up Olga. She would secure her anyhow. The telephone was in the hall, and Olga, with her hat on, was just preparing to go out when the bell sounded. The words of grateful acceptance were on her very lips when her front door bell rang too, very long and insistently, and had hardly left off when it began again. Olga opened the door herself, and there was Mrs. Quantock on the doorstep with her invitation for Saturday night. She was obliged to refuse, but promised to look in if she was not very late in getting away from Mrs. Lucas, and pop went the cat out of the bag. Another romp would be lovely. Already the evils of decentralization and overlapping were becoming manifest. Lucia rang up house after house, only to find that its inhabitants were already engaged. She had got Olga and Georgie, and could begin the good work of education and the crushing of rivalry, not by force but by pure and refined example, but Mrs. Quantock had got everybody else. In the old days this could never have happened, for everything devolved round one central body. Now, with the appearance of this other great star, all the known laws of gravity and attraction were upset. Georgie, again summoned to the telephone, recommended an appeal to Mrs. Quantock's better nature, which Lucia rejected, doubting whether she had one. "But what about the tableau?" asked Georgie. "We three can't very well do tableau for Miss Olga to look at." Then Lucia showed herself truly great. "The merit of tableau does not consist in the number of the audience," she said. She paused a moment. "Have you got the Cophetua robe to set properly?" she asked. "Oh, it'll do," said Georgie dejectedly. On Tuesday afternoon Olga rang up Lucia again to say that her husband was arriving that day, so might she bring him on Saturday. To this Lucia cordially assented, but she felt that a husband and wife sitting together and looking at another husband and wife doing tableaux would be an unusual entertainment, and not characteristic of Riseholme's best. She began to waver about the tableau, and to consider dinner instead. She also wondered whether she had been wronging dear Daisy, and whether she had a better nature after all. Perhaps Georgie might ascertain. Georgie was roused from a little fatigued nap by the telephone, for he had fallen asleep over King Cophetua's robe. Lucia explained the situation, and delicately suggested that it would be so easy for him to pop in to dear Daisy's, and be very diplomatic. There was nobody like Georgie for tact. So, with a heavy yawn, he popped in. "You've come about this business on Saturday," said Daisy unerringly, "haven't you?" Georgie remembered his character for tact. "How wonderful of you to guess that," he said. "I thought we might see if we couldn't arrange something, if we put our heads together. It's such a pity to split up. Lucia has got Miss Olga and her husband coming, and I've got everybody else," said Daisy brightly, "and Miss Bracely is coming over here if she gets away early. Probably with such a small party she will." "Oh, I shouldn't count on that," said he. "We are having some tableaux, and they always take longer than you think. Dear me, I shouldn't have said that, as they were to be impromptu, but I really believe my head is going. You know how thorough Lucia is. She is taking a great deal of trouble about them." "I hadn't heard about that," said Mrs Quantock. She thought a moment. "Well, I don't want to spoil Lucia's evening," she said, "for I'm sure nothing could be so ridiculous as 3 people doing tableaux for 2 others. And, on the other hand, I don't want her to spoil mine, for what's to prevent her going on with the tableaux till church time next morning, if she wishes to keep Miss Bracely away from my house? I'm sure after the way she behaved about my Guru, well, never mind that. How would it be if we had the tableaux first at Lucia's, and then came on here? If Lucia cares to suggest that to me, and my guests consent, I don't mind doing that." By 6 o'clock on Tuesday evening, therefore, all the telephone bells of Riseholme were merrily ringing again. Mrs Quantock stipulated that Lucia's party should end at 10:45 precisely, if it didn't end before, and that everyone should then be free to flock across to her house. She proposed a romp that should even outshine Olga's, and was deep in the study of a manual of round games, which included Hunt the Slipper. Georgie and Peppino took turns at the telephone, ringing up all Mrs Quantock's guests, and informing them of the double pleasure which awaited them on Saturday. Since Georgie had let out the secret of the impromptu tableau to Mrs Quantock, there was no reason why the rest of Riseholme should not learn of this first hand from the Hurst, instead of second hand, with promises not to repeat it, from Mrs Quantock. It appeared that she had a better nature than Lucia credited her with, but to expect her not to tell everybody about the tableau would be putting virtue to an unfair test. "So that's all settled," said Georgie, as he returned with the last acceptance, "and how fortunately it has happened after all. But what a day it has been! Nothing but telephoning from morning till night. If we go on like this, the company will pay a dividend this year, and return us some of our own pennies." Lucia had a quantity of pearl beads, and was stringing them for the tableau of Mary Queen of Scots. "Now that everyone knows," she said, "we might allow ourselves a little more elaboration in our preparations. There is an Elizabethan axe at the Ambermere Arms, which I might borrow for Peppino. Then about the Brunhilde tableau. It is dawn, is it not? We might have the stage quite dark when the curtain goes up, and turn up a lamp very slowly behind the scene, so that it shines on my face. A lamp being turned up very slowly is wonderfully effective. It produces a perfect illusion. Could you manage that with one hand, and play the music of the awakening with the other, Georgino?" "I'm quite sure I couldn't," said he. "Well then, Peppino must do it before he comes on. We will have movement in this tableau. I think that will be quite a new idea. Peppino shall come in just to